Hump day. I'm here with my friend Iris Gonzalez, and we are talking about the startup scene in San Antonio, Texas. I know I have a global audience, but you guys may know or not know that I'm here in San Antonio, Texas, and I met my friend Iris here at Geekdom. We're both mentors there. Geekdom San Antonio has a great mission of launching lots of new startups in the San Antonio area. And so, I met Iris and learned about the things that she was doing with startups. So whether you're in San Antonio or not, I'm sure you can learn a lot today from Iris about our budding startup community and all the ways that you can get moving with your startup. So Iris, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thanks so much for that warm introduction, Amy. And I just want to remind everybody, so we met because we're both mentors at Geekdom, which is a co-working space and startup-focused community with all these great programs and resources here in San Antonio. So I'm going to start off by giving you a did you know fact. Did you know Geekdom was the first co-working space to open in Texas?
What? When?
In 2011, Geekdom was the first startup co-working space in all of Texas. So they kicked it off for everybody.
I love it. And now we have a lot of co-working spaces here. So that's pretty cool.
It's so commonplace. So a little bit about startupsanantonio.com. So I've been a tech journalist here in San Antonio for about a little over 8 years. I started out covering startups and other kind of technology businesses and biomedical and biotech companies too, when I was a tech reporter for the San Antonio Report. And I did that for 2 years. And then I left there and I thought, I should launch my own platform to focus just on the innovation that people are trying to bring to market here in San Antonio. So in very early 2018, I launched startupsanantonio.com. And we're now closing in on our 6th year of coverage, 600 articles later. It really acts as a repository of knowledge of all the things going on in our startup community here in San Antonio. Plus, for venture capitalists looking for companies to invest in, a lot of them read my stories because I'll do these very concise business type stories, but then I will break down the complex topic that the innovator is trying to bring to market and put it into layman's terms. So it helps explain like what is so innovative about Turn Medical's new hospital bed. I'll use an example. And so this bed during COVID, we discovered that if you turn patients on their bellies, it's better for healing the lungs when they're compromised, as in a bad case of COVID. Very hard to do that when you have a sick patient that's tied up to so many tubes. So local inventors, Turn Medical, they have an automated bed that does it in seconds, so that if someone needs medical intervention, you can get them back on their back and then start saving their life without having to manually turn it over. So, I mean, that's just give you one example of a great invention that is now available, being manufactured here and being sold at hospitals across the world.
I think it's so important. Marketing is, I work with so many startups on a global level, and every single one of them struggles with the same thing. And that is telling their story, getting it out to the world, communicating what is that unique selling point, right? What are they doing? So I love that you're just coming in and featuring these businesses and getting them to the forefront, because that example you just gave us of the bed, that could save so many lives. And we don't, not even, in a San Antonio level, but how wonderful that you're blogging about this and writing about it on your website, so that anyone who's searching for these things can find it in the world of the internet and go, hey, this business exists. So I think there's a really, really great lesson there.
And so when I look at the analytics for my website, and I tell this to people because they think, who's reading our stories? And we have readers across the globe. And it shocks me every week. Like, really? Australia, Pakistan, India. India is a huge tech community that there's a lot of people there that are looking for, connecting to innovators in other parts of the world, Europe, Asia. There are people that read these stories every day, and they're looking for what are the latest innovations that are coming out of different tech hubs. And we're an emerging tech hub here in San Antonio. Now, I don't know if you remember when, as mentors, you're supposed to introduce yourself at Geekdom. And what I tell everybody I get ready to mentor, I say, I'm usually the first official media interview for startup founders. So I've heard a lot of pitches, and usually they are pitching me. And then halfway through the interview, I'll stop and say, okay, I'm taking the journalist hat off. I'm putting the mentor hat on. Let's talk about what you just said. And so I give them a little bit of communications training if necessary during that first interview. But that's what I try to do, is work with local innovators. And when their company is ready for that first serious look, a tech article that's well written, that's clear, all the facts are verified, I can vouch for this company because I myself have checked them out. Those articles are gold. That's earned media. And so I explain this to founders everywhere. Earned media is gold. You don't control the narrative. You don't get to read the transcript. You don't get to approve the final copy. If a reporter decides to write about you, prepare well for the interview, because if you do a good job, that reporter is going to write a factual article that puts your company to the best light, because you've been able to present the facts in a way that someone can understand. And then my job is to take all of that technical jargon and explain it for a broader audience.
So I have so many questions for you. Well, because, this is so key for new companies to understand. Here I was thinking we were talking about San Antonio startups today, but we're talking about startups, period, because you have a specific skill set that exists around the world. There's media people everywhere that are looking for you. You mentioned a few things that I want to ask you about. The first one is, you said when they're ready for that first serious look. First impressions are everything.
Yes.
And if I'm reaching out to media for that first look and I'm not ready, I might get dismissed and I might get overlooked again in the future. So how do I know, as a startup, how do I know that I'm ready for that first serious look?
I mentor founders about this very topic all the time. So I'm glad you brought that up, Amy. So what I always tell founders, and that's if you're trying to attract any kind of media coverage, the Business Journal, the paper, TechCrunch, a national publication, NPR. First of all, you need to have something that's newsworthy. I'm not going to write about you launching a company, because people are launching companies every day, right? And companies have a high failure rate. So we're going to write about your company if there is some newsworthy item that we can write about. Now, what I remind all founders is that they need to get to know the reporters that cover their beat. And you start locally by understanding your local news coverage and what each of the different reporters do. So a lot of times, we reporters will chat amongst ourselves. We get deluged with pitches from everybody. And I tell people, pitch somebody who has a good likelihood of being interested in what your company does. So, for example, I get solicitations for, please write an article about what our company is doing. And I'll say, is your company based in San Antonio? The name of my website is Startups San Antonio for a reason. I only cover startups that are located in the Alamo City. And then the Austin-based company or the California-based company will say, well, no, but we saw that you wrote a story about drones, and we thought maybe you can write a story about our drones because we love the way you wrote about it in such an easy to understand way. I said, move to San Antonio and I'll write about you. So single-handedly right there, I'm doing a lot for local economic development because I'm constantly telling out-of-town founders, move here, I'll write about you. If you're a small business and you're soliciting coverage from, yes, read the room. If you're soliciting coverage from someone who writes about startups, I'm going to say, you sound like you have a great small business, but I write about startups. So know the difference between a small business and a startup. A startup is looking to disrupt an established industry or sector with a brand new way of doing things, with a brand new innovative product or service. So if you think about it, Uber, before there was anything Uber related, was a really dramatically new concept. You mean I'm going to use an app to willingly get into a stranger's car? What, are you crazy? And now Uber is accepted. And now you hear people saying, oh, our company, it's like Uber, but for pet food. What? Delivering pet food using an Uber driver? Okay. But that gives you an idea of how much Uber disrupted that industry, the transportation industry. So understand, a small business is a business that can sustain you and your family sometimes for generations. That's great. But a small business is different from a startup in that you're not going to really be able to disrupt an entire industry because you're doing something already established. You're doing a dry cleaning business, for example. People know what to expect when you go into a dry cleaners, right? If you're doing disposable clothing, I'm making this up, all right? Yeah. Disposable clothing that's beautiful, that's sustainable, wearable, fashionable, and it when you don't want it anymore, it dissolves into paper mulch and now you're not adding to the landfill. That would be an incredibly different concept, which means it's much harder. It's much harder to build and scale or grow a startup with something that disruptive and new, because people are going to be like, disposable clothing? What? And what? And you want me to what? So think about it. Your marketing team has to think creatively. How are we going to describe this brand new concept so that people want to buy it? Your sales team, what's our sales process for something that no one has ever attempted to sell before, right? Whereas a small business, we know what a dry cleaning business is. It's just a matter of deciding capital and growth and employees and talent retention for scaling that. For, you can have 20 dry cleaning stores in a particular area. That's the big difference between a startup and a small business. I love small businesses and I mentor a lot of small business owners, but I write about startups, innovative startups.
Makes sense. So my next question for you is, you mentioned like you're ready to apply for earned media. So you first talked about you've got to have something newsworthy to talk about. Then you said you got to know your reporter and what they cover, right? And be able to craft a pitch. You need to be ready for that, right? But then how do you actually apply? How do you find reporters? How do you apply?
The secret sauce of attracting attention. It's a lot like dating. How do you get the cool person to check you out and want to ask you out on a date?
Do tell.
Be interesting, be attractive, attract attention in a way that is not cringeworthy and is actually newsworthy. So, okay, let's go down the list of some tips for business owners of startups, or even this applies for small businesses as well. How do I attract earned media, that good media coverage that I can put on my website and I can promote on my social media, and it's going to help increase brand awareness of what my company is trying to do? Do something newsworthy. What's newsworthy? The fact that you hired a new chief of staff, people are getting hired and fired every day in the city. The fact that you hired a new CEO, that's the former CEO of Salesforce, and they came to your company. Wow, that's big news. So right there, that gives you an idea. It's something that you're going to see written in a headline, hopefully a good headline. If you have an innovative product or service that you're wanting the public to know about, then you're going to be reading news coverage of your market and your competitors. So let's use electric vertical and takeoff landing vehicles, which is a fancy way of saying like those 1 or 2 passenger Jetsons type of aircraft. Archer Aviation is a perfect example. They're based in California. Port San Antonio is building a vertiport. If you go to my website, you can read my article that explains in plain English, why is Port San Antonio building a vertiport? Here's why. That's the actual title of the article. But they're building it because right now there's so much interest in building these small, sustainable ways of transportation that you can get into, like an air taxi, and even if it's robotically controlled even, and you can go from point A to point B, and it's not polluting, it's electrically charged. And of course, people are saying, whoa, this is really disruptive. And maybe, I don't even know if it's airworthy. FAA has certified them, certain ones. So why, if you're in this sector and you're developing one, you're going to be watching news coverage of your competitors and the people that write about companies like you. You pay attention. If you're building one of these things, how are people writing about your competitors? And then you start following your favorite journalists. Follow your favorite tech journalists. Follow those news people that do a good job of covering your industry, your product area, because you know they have a good grasp of the topic because you read it and didn't go, pfft. Sometimes I'll read an article and I'll go, oh, this is a person who really did not understand what they were writing about. And so there's inaccuracies or just not the complete view. So if you see someone that you like and they're doing a good job of writing, follow them online, like their posts, comment on their posts. Guess what? We notice the people who follow us and like us and comment on our content online. Now I know you exist. So if I see someone local who, say, likes the Vertiport article, and then they make a comment, this is good to know because we're building one soon. It's an intriguing sentence, right? A comment. Guess what I wind up doing? I will DM you and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about what you mentioned in your comment, that you're building something. It's like dating, folks. Be attractive, be authentic. And if you have a good compatibility match between the journalist who's looking to write these kind of stories and what you're offering, you're going to connect. Get on social media and do it that way. It's not creepy. It's not stalking. So don't do the creepy stalking stuff, but be newsworthy and authentic and engage with those journalists. And if there's a good match, then you can follow up with an email pitch. Short, sweet, to the point.
Okay, so now you just opened up another can of worms here.
This is the making of the media sausage, like what actually goes into it. And I look at social media because I'm looking for these clues. When people go on LinkedIn and they post, like a little humble brag thing, oh, we can't wait to share what we're working on October 1st. And then I look at their profile. I see that they're maybe a scientist in a particular field. And I think, ooh, battery technology. And they're bragging about, or hinting that they're going to launch something soon. I DM them. I contact that person and say, hey, I was intrigued by your comment. So this is how you try to make yourself known to a journalist. And now we're going to talk about writing those email pitches.
Short. I'm learning so much.
Short, sweet, to the point. I don't need to read a PhD thesis because if there's a good match and I respond, you'll have plenty of time to tell me during the interview. But write a short, sweet, and to the point pitch. Doesn't have to be fancy. Now, I can tell you've done your homework if you write a good email pitch because there's a good match, right? So those companies, those founders from California, from Austin that write me right there, I answer because I'm polite, but I already know without reading the rest of the email, you Startup San Antonio, what in the domain name did you not understand? I write about you if you're here in San Antonio. So don't ignore that. It's like dating, folks. If you're looking for, a short woman, or you're looking for a tall guy, I mean, whatever it is, whatever your criteria are, be mindful of the criteria so that there's a reasonable, good matchup. Or like applying for a job. If you have the 70% match, send the email pitch. Then we can talk.
So when we talk about the email pitch being short, sweet, and to the point, I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, right? They want to provide information, but they don't want to be, and in this case, let's say we connected on LinkedIn, you sent me a DM, and now, you're like, well, I think I'd be interested in potentially interviewing you or potentially writing about you. Can you send me an email? And I go, okay, yes, of course I can send you an email. So you're looking for a quick pitch, hey, Iris, it was great talking to you on LinkedIn over chat. As I mentioned, our company is here in San Antonio, and we do X, Y, and Z. This is how we help people. This is how we're different. This is how we're newsworthy, right? Let's connect. Whatever. And
so, do you want to know what I'm looking for in that pitch?
Yeah,
now I'm going to tell you. So this is when you're ready for your first serious look by a journalist. Do you have a product or a service? You'd be surprised how many people reach out to me and they say, well, we just launched and we haven't built it yet. It's like, come back to me when you've built it.
That's a good
right.
tip.
So you need to have something that I can see, rather than, because news is about newsworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
PR is somebody that you pay to brag about you and your company. Marketing is your marketing team writing content to make prospective clients interested and intrigued in what you're selling. They're very different. PR is not marketing. Marketing and PR are not media. So don't expect a journalist to be your PR or your marketing representative. That's not their job. And that's not what they're doing with the news story. So if you, there's some exceptions. If you have a product that's about to launch and you came to me saying, hey, I'd like to give you an exclusive. And I love hearing those words, right? Let me write about your product right when you're getting ready to launch it. I'm going to do fact checking. Your website, is it current? Is it accurate? Does it have all the information that a prospective client, customer, or venture capitalist, which is another fancy term for an investor, that they're going to want to look and say, hey, what's the product? What's the pain point that they're trying to solve, right? Who's the team? And I look at all of this on the website. If you've been in the news, take that news story, create a media page. This is our company in the news. That's valuable because it's earned media. You didn't pay for that. That's not pay for play. That's somebody who decided you and your company are newsworthy. That's earned media coverage that you want to highlight on your website. So I look for all these things, right? And social media. Social media channels are important because when I publish a story, and you see this with tech journalists, we tag the company so that you show up and you get the alert, and it's, amplifying the signal, right? It amplifies the signal for you. It amplifies the signal for me, because now I have your network reading the news story I just wrote about you.
Oh my gosh. I was at a new business in San Antonio the other day. It was a float company, and I was going to create a TikTok video and tag them because float is really, really innovative. It's something new that and they're the only business in San Antonio offering this. And they have a really cool business. Like it's really awesome. And I had a great experience there. And I go and try and, highlight them, and they have no TikTok. They have no presence that I can tag. And I'm the same way, you know, I want to use your network. I want to use my network.
What a lost opportunity.
No, and I did that for another small business here in San Antonio, and they did have the ability to be tagged. And I mean, we got thousands of views of that video. And so like it is missed opportunity. And the snowball effect too, right? Like that video is going to go up then, or that social media post or that article, but you might get thousands of visits after that. And so if you didn't tag it from the beginning, now you've missed that. So you talked about they need to be ready to be fact checked. So their website needs to be good. Like they need to make sure not only are they newsworthy and they have their product and their service,
and be LinkedIn profile. So your LinkedIn profile needs to be updated and accurate. So these are some of I'll share now some of the pitfalls, right? So that founders don't make these mistakes when they're talking to a journalist. A lot of times people will say, well, how come so many news stories have errors? And I remind people, I said, a journalist has to be an instant mini expert in order to be able to interview you knowledgeably. So we're reading up and becoming like quick learners on so many topics, just so that we can understand what you're saying to us and that we can ask meaningful questions. We're not an expert. You are. So you are the expert of you, your company, and what you're telling me. It's up to you to make sure that your terms, explain them. If you have specialized terminology, explain it the first time you use terms. I'm going to check your LinkedIn profile. If you have old information on your LinkedIn profile, I don't know that. If you have outdated information on your website, I don't know it's outdated. And so the very few times that I've had, founders after the article comes out, this thing that you put in there, that's inaccurate. And I said, I took that from your LinkedIn profile. It's like, what? I said, pull it up. And then they'll say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I have completely forgotten about that. I said, so journalists look at your biographies. They look at your about section, because you'll write about the founder. Why is the founder working on this solution, this innovative solution? Well, you'll tell me during the interview, but chances are you'll do it's just word salad stream of consciousness, right? Meanwhile, I'm taking notes. So make sure you give information in nugget size, bite sizes, packets. And then make sure, do you know what a dermatologist does? Or do you know what, proning is? Like in the Turn Medical article, do you know what proning is? Well, after reading all the COVID articles, yes. But what if I didn't? That's always good, is to make sure you explain specialized terminology, have updated information on your website and all your social channels and like your LinkedIn company page, your profile page, because I'm going to check all that. That's part of the due diligence, the fact checking. And the last thing, actually two more things. Don't expect to proofread the article. That's not what journalists do. We're not your staff. That's why I reiterate again, journalism is not PR, and it's not communications, and it's not marketing. You pay for that expertise. You get to proof it. Since you don't pay for the article that I'm writing about you, I have to do the best job possible of getting all that information from you, digesting it, and then publishing it, with the hopes that when you read it, you go, yeah, you got everything spot on. Right?
And we sometimes want to blame a journalist that didn't write an accurate perspective. Same thing with influencers. When we product brand owners are working with influencers, we get upset when an influencer doesn't say something nice about our product or says something wrong that's incorrect. But what we need to take from that, if that happens, the lesson learned we need to take from that is, where did they get that information?
Exactly.
Because not only if Iris got that information and Iris is wrong about my product, how many consumers who are just searching are also wrong, or my service, or whatever innovation, or investors, like all the people who are looking for your business and trying to figure out who you are and what you do, and reading the media articles where you have been represented, reading your product listings, all of that. if the information isn't properly presented there and clearly presented, if you don't have a cohesive web footprint across the board, that is where you're going to run into those pitfalls. And that is a great lesson learned. Don't get mad at Iris. Don't get mad at the journalist. Don't get mad at the influencer who misrepresented you. Go Google yourself and figure out, what am I missing and how can I make this better? And even better yet, plan those things, as we've talked about on today's call. Plan those things ahead of time so that when you're ready to reach out to a journalist, you are ready to go. Like, your best information, your best foot is forward.
And so I tell founders, practice talking about yourself, your journey, right? As a founder, your company, your market, practice all of those scripts and practice explaining it in a way that your grandmother would understand it. Because if grandma can understand what you're doing, the journalist is going to understand. And so a lot of these small mistakes are typically because the founder was just talking as if they were talking to their co-founder, or they were talking to their accountant who knows what they're doing, instead of realizing this person isn't an expert, is under deadline pressure to get this written in the next hour or so, right? How many people can write a technical article under that kind of time pressure, right? And I may not have done the best job of explaining it. So the best communicators I have seen are CEOs that take this as a sacred mission. They take it very seriously, and they practice and practice and practice. And by the time you get to talk to them, chances are they have given this spiel 200, 300, 400 times, but they make it seem effortless. Why? Because they know their script. They've made those mistakes early on, and they know what terms to not use, because it could be confused with something else, or they'll use a term and then they'll immediately explain it with, it's like Uber, but for pet food, whatever analogy you want to try to use. So use clear, easy examples in everyday life if you need to explain something complex. And remember, after the article is written, if there is an error, that's the only time that a journalist will go back and, quote, rewrite it. They will fix an error. So if they misspelled your name, if they mischaracterized your title, they got your title wrong. And this was the LinkedIn example. It's like, dude, I copied that straight from your LinkedIn profile, right? Your exact title. So that was a, oops, I'm sorry, but can you still fix it? And I'll fix my LinkedIn profile. So that was a, sure, I'll do that. But be aware, right? But if you see the article and it's like, well, I didn't like the quote you chose. Sorry, it's written. It's accurate. You said it. It was on the record. So remember, when you're talking to a journalist, you're on the record until you specifically state that what I'm about to tell you is for background purposes only. It's not on the record. And then when you get ready to, like, okay, I'm ready to be quoted again. Okay, on the record, let me answer that question. On the record means I can repeat verbatim what you just said because it's on the record. And a lot of journalists will record interviews so that they can go back and capture that quote exactly. Now, when you see a quote and it has those 3 dots somewhere in the middle, it's called an ellipsis. You ever see that in the newspaper or you see it online? What does that tell you? That was a super long quote. But there was something good in the beginning and there was something good in the end, and the journalists wanted to use that quote. So they used the good parts and then all the blah, 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 3 dots. Try your best to speak in quotable sentences.
Yeah.
Try practicing like I'm doing right now. Speak in quotes, quotable chunks of information. Don't speak in paragraphs. So when you go back to the transcript of this later, Amy, you're going to see that there are parts of the interview where I did speak in paragraphs. But right now, I'm being very deliberate in how I'm speaking because you want to speak in bite-sized chunks. You know who does that really, really well? Our mayor. Mayor Ron Nirenberg is a master communicator, and he should be because he graduated from the Annenberg School of Communications, right? But he is very practiced and understands that he needs to be understood by a wide variety of people because he's mayor for an entire city. So he's very careful and very deliberate in how he speaks. That's why I tell people, if you want to get better, listen to the news, listen to public figures when they're speaking, read quotes and interviews and news stories about topics that you're interested in, and start noticing how people come across so that you can do the good things and avoid the pitfalls.
I love it. So I have to leave. This has been so wonderful having you on the show today. We've learned so much. I've learned so much about just what we should be thinking about when we're trying to be newsworthy and all of that. So what would you say before we wrap it up and tell everybody how to contact you and how to learn more about San Antonio startups? What would you say is, one piece of advice that you have? I mean, you've written about so many startups. What is your best piece of advice for a new startup owner when it comes to really creating, thinking about creating that image, becoming newsworthy, all of that? Like, maybe they think they're newsworthy, but they're not. What is your one piece of advice for them?
I've got it for you, Amy. Okay, so here it is. I tell all founders that I mentor, I said, become the historian of your startup. What does this mean? From the beginning, start a file called timeline. Like, say your company is named Dark Hive. It's actually a real company. They're a local company here that's producing affordable drones for military and law enforcement. So, and John Goodson, the CEO, will laugh because I told him this very same thing too. I said, just create a timeline from the beginning and capture photos, and make sure that when you capture these photos, they're not static shots. Try to capture dynamic photos of you and your team building something out in the field, you and the team talking to a customer. And that means you're going to have someone who's a decent photographer on your team that can take those photos of you to document what your company is doing. AlloSense, that's another great, it's a sensor company here in San Antonio. He, the founder, Roman Sandoval, went and gave a talk at a very high level a conference. And the first thing I said was, did you have somebody take photos of you presenting at this prestigious event? And he said, oh, Iris, we thought about it, but then at the last minute, we kind of forgot. So, okay. Be your company's historian and take all those photos and keep track of those milestones, because at some point you do want to have something on your website. Maybe you don't have it on your website, but it's available if you need to provide it or refresh your own memory. Here's the timeline of when we won that first contract, when we got that first big significant client, when we got our first successful whatever. And if you had that plus great photos, when you do talk to your first journalist and have your first interview, the journalist is going to say, do you have any photos you can provide for the story? And you'll be able to say, yes, I have an entire Dropbox folder. Let me send access to you so you can see. And I love those founders because it makes my job easy, because I can't go back in time and send a photographer to take a photo of you launching your product, right? But so many are so busy in building the thing, building the company. And I understand, you're launching a startup. It's like flying a plane that you're building in midair and you hope you don't crash and burn. Remember, you're going to want to document your history, because if you're successful, you want to be able to share. Like, think big company, you're doing great. Plus One Robotics is a perfect example. They're a robotics company, very cutting edge at Port San Antonio, huge building. 6 years ago, when I started Startup San Antonio, they were couch surfing because it was a startup. They didn't have money to pay for space. So they were couch surfing at a friend's location because they didn't have room for their robot that they were working on. 6 years later, big workforce, big contracts. So at some point, it would be nice to walk into the lobby and show from our humble beginnings to where we are today, right? So just remember to be your own historian. Document your company's progress from day one, because at some point your memory's going to need help. And at another point, tech journalists will hopefully want to come knocking on your door and write a story, and you'll be able to say, yeah, I have all these dates. I have a really brief timeline I can send for you, because the dates are confusing, and there's a Dropbox folder for you to look at. You can use all those pictures. Don't save those pictures as image 12756. Save each photo. Get into the practice of team at X location doing Y. From the left, name the people in the photo. So many times I get a great photo, but it's like, there are 5 people in the photo. For the caption, I need to list who they are. I don't remember. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself, right? So just do all of this for yourself, and then you will be ready for media, for that earned media. And then a bonus tip, after that article comes out, put it on your website. It's evergreen content. Your origin story never is outdated. Why? Because it's evergreen. It's like a green tree that never loses its leaves. Your origin story is never going to be old, because people are going to still ask you every time, what made you decide to launch this company? So those kind of stories, you need to promote them yourself. You earned it. So put it on your website, share it every now and then on social media to remind people, hey, a tech journalist thought we were pretty newsworthy for doing X. We're sharing our story again because it came out a year ago and you maybe missed it the first time. And people do miss it. So share your stories. Those are,
and customers love to see that too. So yeah, that's so great. Well, thank you so much, Iris, for being here today and for giving us all these really great tips of how we can be the next newsworthy startup. And why don't you tell everybody how they can find your news stories and how they can follow you as their favorite journalist?
Great. Well, the website is startups, plural, because I always hope to write about more than one, startupsanantonio.com. And you can contact me through the website. I've got a contact form there. I look at the emails every day. LinkedIn, I post on my personal profile, The Real Iris Gonzalez, as well as Startup San Antonio has a LinkedIn page. And then we're on X and Facebook and Instagram as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. And everybody, the link to Startup San Antonio is in the description. So click on there, hop on over there, check everything out, and leave your comments if you have questions. And you can always follow Iris or Startup San Antonio on LinkedIn. You can follow me, Amy Weiss, on all the channels at Amazing at Home. And thank you guys for being here today. Have a great rest of your week.
And you killed it, Amy. Go into journalism. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you.